They had the chemistry, they had the passion.
But what they didn't have was clarity.
In 1997's Love Jones, when Nina thought Darius had moved on after she interrupted their relationship to go be with her ex, she returned and started dating his friend.
In Love Jones, love wasn't the problem. Miscommunication was, and it almost cost them everything.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation of $5 or more via our website at axiom.app, Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. The executive producers of this video are Anton Colvin, who requested this film through Axiom Amnesia's Deep Dive On Demand program that we'll tell you more about later, and also Kelvin Pollard, who is a longtime Axiom Amnesia contributor.
There will be spoilers, so if you don't want to get this spoiled for you, you might want to just come back later.
That's right. In this movie, Love Jones is like an old school classic. And let's talk about the background.
Old school.
I mean, it is old school. We old school at this point.
That's crazy.
So the director and writer was Theodore Witcher. And this is considered like this cult classic of the time that offered this rare and intelligent and artful portrayal of Black love that was outside of trauma and comedy. Like trauma, think about like Jason's Lyric, and you know, the people here, love was the main problem, even though they had problems with, you know, finding a job and, you know, where their career would go. It wasn't the critical, I'm not surviving kind of problems. These are people who, without a job, somehow still found places to stay. And it wasn't, you know, like they were just steeped in poverty in the film.
It's the only movie a lot of people say they want to see.
Yeah, and you guys have been asking for this for a long time, so thanks for making this video happen to our two executive producers. And the themes that they talk about in here are like love versus timing and emotional vulnerability and artistic identity, fear of commitment, modern romance, modern for 1997 because things have changed by 2005, and just communication in general. And by the way, it was the director, Theodore Witcher, his directorial debut. So this was his first movie. And the soundtrack also became iconic. I think of what's that one song? Ba, 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 ba. That song is, I always think about that song when I think about this movie.
There wasn't an 80s song? Hopeless. Is Dion Ferris? Is that her?
Yeah, Dion Ferris. You're right, not Desiree. I was thinking about, I don't know, those songs all came kind of at the same time. But yeah, Dion Ferris, that was her name. And for some reason, I just kind of like the sounds of that song, right? But anyway, it always reminds me of this movie whenever I hear that song. Maybe I need to add that to my little playlist. I don't have a whole lot of neo soul because honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of neo soul at the time.
Was that really supposed to be neo soul? I guess it's categorized as, but I still think of it more as soul or R&B, I guess. You know, because we don't need to get into what makes up this genre. Well, and it's kind of like
that other song, which I think maybe is Desiree, which is kind of like, you gotta be bad.
Oh,
gotta be, that song, right? That
just sound outside of Black genres to me.
Yeah, and I think when they don't have a place to put it, if it came out in the 90s, then they're just like, let's shove it into neo soul. Although there were neo soul artists who I did enjoy. I know I'm digressing, but we gotta just set the stage for the time. And I think about people like, of course, Erykah Badu. But see, that first whole album by Erykah Badu, like, I loved that. And
yeah, because of what this movie is supposed to be. And I don't know if we should talk about that first, or
yeah, we'll loop back to that hopefully, and if not, y'all join us in the comments and we can continue that conversation because sometimes these videos do get long. Okay, so we were talking about the themes, and it was the directorial debut and neo soul, you know, on the soundtrack, and this film is widely credited with influencing a wave of mature and kind of soulful Black romance films of the 2000s. So think Brown Sugar and, you know, other ones. Even The Wood was 1999. right? But this,
Yeah,
it still
and
came after, and I almost feel like The Wood is sort of 2000-ish. But again, where you have these mature romance films with,
but what black romances were before that in the 90s? Because we're
I
talking
mean,
about
Jason's
black movie
Lyric, you
renaissance.
had
Yeah.
romance pieces in movies like Set It Off and
Romance piece, that's every movie, right?
yeah,
So,
so y'all go
probably
to the
Jason's
comments and
Lyric.
tell us what movies do you feel were romance movies of like the 1990s that were black romance movies. So then, like a basic summary, in case you haven't seen Love Jones, I mean, it basically breaks down into these two characters, right? Nina, who is Nia Long's character, and then we have Darius, who is played by none other than O-Dog. No, I'm kidding. Lorenz Tate, right?
O-Dog, he moved to the West Coast,
Somebody will
changed
say
his
it.
name, and then started doing poetry.
No, he moved. Yeah, he moved he moved from the West Coast to Chicago because that's where this film takes
Chicago,
place.
yeah.
Yes, moved to
Like
the
you
Midwest.
said, though, it feels so much like New York.
Well, and we're gonna get to that for sure. And so that's
He
that's
moved
all
to
he
Chicago
did.
and he changed his name.
And but anyway, so those are the stars.
Want us to cover your favorite movie ASAP? A one-time contribution of just $50 or more to Axiom Amnesia gets you a deep dive on demand, a 30-minute discussion on any film you choose.
It's easy. Step 1, send $50 via our website, axiom.app, where you can pay via card, Apple Pay, or you can pay directly via Cash App at $Axiom Amnesia. See the links below. Step 2, tell us your movie, email, the name you want to appear on screen, and what kind of deep dive you want. General, a specific character, a particular aspect of the film, etc. Step 3, watch your deep dive on demand with your name listed as executive producer.
Lock in your deep dive on demand today and hurry. Spots are limited.
This offer is not valid for filmmakers or distributors, subject to availability and terms apply. And basically what happens is, they meet against kind of the backdrop of this 90s poetry scene, and they're hot and heavy fast, and then they have some miscommunications, and then they have trouble in their relationship, and so a couple of things happen, but nothing too wild. And then it's like every other love story at the end, it's there's a scene where somebody's chasing a train, and there's a scene where and then at the end they wind up back together, like most stories. Not to give it away, but I mean, we're going to discuss the ins and outs of it though, which is what you guys want to talk about, which is why we need to talk about the film in detail. And I'm going to try to get through this, but we want to get through this so that we get the meat of the discussion later. But at the beginning of the film, when it opens, we see Nina looking out the window. That's Nia Long's character. And then Lisa Nicole Carson plays Josie, who's her best friend. And Nia is moving out of her apartment with her boyfriend. And, you see a picture of her, and she's looking all sad and, whatever. And so she's starting a new life after this breakup. And, she's got her moving boxes and, the typical kind of scene. Sort of reminded me a little bit of Disappearing Acts, the way at the beginning of that movie we see Sanaa Lathan's character, but she's moving into her new place, and that's how she winds up meeting Wesley Snipes. But anyway, next we see this poetry club. Bill Bellamy and Isaiah Washington are some of the other people who are in this film. Bill Bellamy plays Wood, and then we have Isaiah Washington who plays
Savon.
Yeah, I always say his name wrong. And so there's this scene where they're always at this club, and there's a friend group, right? And Isaiah Washington's character is married, and we'll talk more about him later. But anyway, the guy from Drumline is also one of the characters.
The guy from Drumline.
Yes.
Leonard Roberts.
Yes.
Is Eddie.
And so, they're there at this, poetry club or whatever. And I'm not sure. Go to the comments and let us know. Are people still doing like poetry slams and black poetry at clubs? It had gotten popular, really popular in the 90s and even into the 2000s, where people were very much into that. I wasn't personally into that scene in Chicago in the 90s, but I did go to some clubs and whatever in the 2000s. And, it still wasn't my thing, but I definitely respected it. So, of course, Nia Long's character, Nina, shows up, and, Lorenz Tate's character, who's Darius, decides, he doesn't decide. He's always on stage. He's a poet. So he goes up to, deliver his poetry after he has met Nina at the bar, and he's trying to get with her or whatever.
How did they meet though?
Well, she just goes up to get a drink.
She spoke to him first.
She did speak to him first.
That's important, right? Because, that's very forward at the time. Even in 2025, you have women saying that they shouldn't, be the first to approach somebody, really.
But she approached him, and, then he makes his entire poem or spoken word piece about her. And so
was he freestyling?
I don't know. What do you think?
Her name.
I think
talking about a blues for Nina.
Yeah. And so watching this, and just for full context, I haven't seen this movie in a while. It's been a few years, but this movie also is not in my rotation of movies I watch all the time. So this might be total like my 5th time in decades seeing this movie, right? 4th or 5th time. So I didn't even remember all the fine details. I just kind of remember generally what happened. I know they get back together, and that was what was important. So it really caused me to kind of pause and consider what I'm seeing happening in front of me. So, he tries to impress her in a very easy way for him, right? Because he's a writer, so he's a wordsmith. And so he's like, yeah, let me just throw something together, and, it'll be impressive to her because, I'm a guy who's always up on stage and whatever. But she just wasn't impressed. Now, thinking about the timing of this, she's just broken up with her boyfriend. And yeah.
Well, the thing was, so after the let out, they, Darius and his friends were hanging outside, right? And then Nina and her friend, Josie, come up, right? And then she's just basically like, thank you for my poem. And then, they get into this back and forth. And she's like, yeah, because basically she didn't like it because it was just about sex. So that's what he was on. And then he's basically like, what else is there to write about? And then she grabbed, old school, she grabs a pen. Somebody always has a ink pen on them, and she starts to write on his hand, and you're supposed to just think it's a phone number because that's what it was back in the day. And she writes love on his hand, which is the answer, and everybody could have guessed that, even a fool in 1997.
Yes.
What else is there to write about, bro? Yeah, so that's really why she wasn't feeling the poem. It's just like when I listen to like gangster rap and stuff, I appreciate the art, right? Or just the most misogynistic of raps. Sometimes I appreciate the art, the wordplay, all that, all the tropes and stuff. But the content, or what it's about, isn't necessarily the greatest because there's other things. And I think that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and let me just also say that one of the things that was a little odd to me at the time, and it might have just been strictly because of him playing O-Dog, is I felt like O-Dog was so young and youthful, and I always felt like Nia Long by this point was more mature. And so it seemed like an odd coupling at the time.
Yeah, and then he did the Inkwell too after that.
Right. And so he was doing these very young, practically teenager roles, and she was graduating into, young adulthood. So when you take a look at it, though, these actors are only about 5 years apart.
But I also think that was his character, right? He was the young, immature guy who all there is sex, right? And then that's his arc in the film, is to grow beyond that.
So that is his arc in the film. And I feel like that should be pointed out because I think that also might have been a little of why she wasn't taking him as seriously, even because it's unclear to me whether they're supposed to be the same age in the film or not. But, just kind of looking at how he felt from his other roles, talking about Lorenz Tate, he just felt young, by comparison. So that I think is important to note. And, but he's just talking about sex, and she's talking about love. And I feel like that off rip is sort of the miscommunication. Maybe it's not a miscommunication. It's just that they are fixated on different things or looking for different things at that point.
Yeah, and I think they were supposed to just be a kind of a generalization of men and women, possibly in the early 20s, right?
So after that happens, though, he does challenge her to write something for him like the next week when they come. And she's like, well, it won't be about sex. So I just wanted to point out, like, where you mentioned that it won't be about sex. Like, so I just wanted to kind of tag that on to what you were saying, because, I'm like, all right, she just happened to show up. Like, do I have to be a poet?
Yes. If
or
you're
a writer?
there,
Can I just appreciate it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, you can't. That's that's our
so
issue with culture, but we'll get to that, I guess.
that's what I will say about that.
Yeah, so then we find out that Nina is a gopher for Roger, who is an abusive photographer who treats her like trash. She's like, oh, they didn't have whatever. And then he just throws it.
Just throws the lunch across the room like, wait, why are you working for them? And then we also find out, meanwhile, Darius has left his job.
Yeah.
He's quit, and he's like, I got enough money to hold me until, because Darius wants to write a book. He's a writer. And then they run into each other again. He and Nina
so
run into
Sheila
each
works
other
at a record store, right? And Nina is in there when Darius shows up, right? And then Darius, goes over to talk to her. He plays a Charlie Parker record, right? And then she was like, he was chasing after her or whatever, right? And then he just, oh no, I just happened to be here. But she buys a record with a check. Right. And then he somehow gets Sheila, who is his friend, who they were hanging out with at the beginning of the movie. Right. A friend who he knows, to get her address off the check and give it to him.
Crazy. And so let me just rewind for all of you youngins who really don't know, like, about a physical check besides an e-check, because maybe you've gotten a physical check from your job at some point, or somehow got like a paper check, but it might be few and far between. But back in the day, we used to carry around check books that we paid for things with checks. And so it wouldn't be uncommon. It was a time where people were still in identities, but for whatever reason, nobody thought about the fact that all your information is on this check, and you pass these checks around everywhere, and they can be stolen and everything else. But anyway, so you'd pay with the check, and it of course has her new address where she's moved to on this check. And I think it's very weird, that he decides that he's going to just start being stalkerish.
Because he shows up at her door.
Yes.
Like, wait, what? When he asked Sheila, he's like, can I give me her address? I'm like, wait, what, bro? Come on now.
Okay, so we were both alive during this time. So it's not like we didn't live through 1997, which is different than like if you're just coming of age in 2025 and you didn't live in that world. So because I'm saying this because I want to get out ahead of the people who are like, well, you can't interpret the film through today's. No, we lived back then, and it would have been weird back then too. It definitely would be weird today. Like, you're getting the police called on you by a lot of people today. Like, it just, no. Don't show up to somebody's house like that. But even back then, that was just strange and unacceptable.
So he showed up. She's basically like, how you get my address? And then, they have a little back and forth. And then he started looking inside, trying to get invited in. Like, wait, what?
He done brought that Isley Brothers CD she was looking for. That was his ticket into her house. Now, then we find out that she's house sitting for the photographer that she works for or whatever. And so he comes on in.
How does that even make sense?
I don't know. Maybe
was it the photographer's check?
No, she said so when she was in the store writing it, she said my new address is on there. So it was like she wrote her new address information on the check that had her old stuff. But it was her check.
How long do you house sit for?
Well, I mean, maybe she was going to do it for 6 months, 5 months, 3 months, whatever period of time. I mean, how long was she going to be, in Chicago later in the film when she comes?
Then
like,
at
we just
that point,
don't
it's
know.
not house sitting.
Well, this could be a flaw in the writing. We don't know, right? But let us know, those of you who have house sat for rich people, how long are they normally gone for? Was
it a printed address on the check?
There's always a printed address on the check. So she probably crossed it out. So what you would do, because I mean, when I moved, I think about, like, I had a checkbook when I was in the dorm, and I was using like my college dorm address. And of course, that changes every semester. So, I mean, I would just cross it out, or like if the, your dorm room number was different, you just cross it out.
I think it's a convenient thing, right? It's not, the issue isn't that this whole check thing. The issue is that this is, let me get an address off the thing, right? And then I'm just house sitting.
Yeah.
Because of how the place looks. right? So it's just very weird.
That's a good question. So was she really house sitting? Go to the comments, or was this her house and she just wanted to be like, this fool showed up in my house and I don't want to say I live here. I don't really know. I didn't even think about that as a possibility at the time.
When he invited himself in, she's like, yeah, basically, and then rolls her eyes. Like, why did you even let the guy in?
I just didn't think she lived in as nice of a place, considering, with all the stuff that was in there, considering that she hadn't yet had her break in photography. You're like a gopher.
Exactly.
So where you going to get that money to be living nice like that? But yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, so then basically he
weasels his way in the house and looks around.
Try to get a date, basically. That's what he tries to do. So then they end up going to a get together with Darius' friends, the ones who were sitting together at the speakeasy. I don't even know what it's called.
Speakeasy. You want to say speakeasy. Yeah.
At the poetry slam.
At the poetry slam, the poetry club, or, the poetry event place. So, and this is where I have in my notes. This is supposed to be Chicago, but the vibe just feels very New York. And then I was like, where are they supposed to be living in Chicago? Because I'm like, this is not the aesthetic of the people who were young at this time in Chicago.
Maybe you don't know the bougie people.
Oh, I think I know the bougie.
Oh, see, Cheri is a bougie.
I didn't say I was a bougie.
Get it out of her.
I didn't say that I was a bougie.
Was you hanging around with them having male versus female discussions on the weekends? See?
So I don't remember. I mean, I feel like during this time period, I'm going to school and
So just think. Let's say I am lower class. And where I'm from, and they have a movie, and I'm like, that ain't how people are where I'm from. Because I don't know the people who are like that.
Well, okay.
And they seem to be poetry people too, right? So
I wasn't a poetry person. So maybe it's just the poetry people.
So I have to get into what the movie is about, really. So the movie is, it's supposed to be the quintessential Black Renaissance, right? So you had Harlem Renaissance that everybody knows about and always talk about this time of arts and all of this that's going on in New York at the time, right? So in 90, we usually only talk about the movie side of it, the Black film Renaissance. But this kind of what it was. You had all those writers who's turned into movies, right? The adaptations and stuff. When we had the poets and stuff, and all that stuff was going on in the 90s. And the dance and all that. So it really was another Black Renaissance at the time. And I think this movie tried to capture that thing. So that's what I think these characters supposed to represent, right? This whole community, you have, I don't know, Duke Ellington and all them from back in the day. This is supposed to be that crew, right? You may have, one of them big writers from the 90s?
I mean... You like Terry McMillan style type of people?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's her with her friend and her group, right? That's why when you go to like the poetry slam and stuff, it's expected. And then when we get to Darius's apartment, she's basically like, you're a Renaissance man. Artists do everything, right? I take pictures, I paint, I do the poetry and all of this.
They do music,
right?
They sing, they play the piano, they review videos.
That's who these people are.
And movies.
So most regular people ain't just gonna be around these folks.
So I will say that at this time in my life, I was not deep into the artsy crowd. Although I feel like I was very familiar with it because I spent a lot of time in Hyde Park, which clearly at some parts of the film they are adjacent to that. So this is so like I get.
So do you think that's the place where this sort of lifestyle would be? Possibly.
Some of it could have been here, but I thought, I was like, okay, are these like bougie Negroes that are living like on the north side? Because at first I was like, where are they living? And of course you can't really exactly tell everything. But at one point in the film, she's like, oh, you want to go all the way to the north side. So that says to me that they were living on the south side, because it wasn't the west side. Okay, if you know, you know. So they were living on the south side, and I was like, well, where on the south side were they living? And then at one point they passed by Rainbow Push. You could see it kind of in the background, or near where Rainbow Push is, which, if you know where that is kind of not far and probably will eventually be included in the complex that will be like the Obama library area where the University of Chicago is kind of expanded out, I
don't think we can take what they show in the movie as where it's set.
I agree with that. But, at least it was giving me a little real vibe as to like where it could have possibly been. It's always hard though when you're
familiar with
the place, right? So I will give a pass on that, but I will say the two things that stand out is it did not feel like 1990s Chicago. It opens with these images of Black people in various states that almost seem disconnected. Like, you know, an older Black woman and a family and people standing there smiling, like these images, how it's setting the scene that this is Chicago. Of course, you're going to see the L train, all that, right? And I'm just like,
a very artsy depiction.
Yes.
So that brings it to other questions. Does art really capture the essence of whatever?
Maybe.
Right?
And
because
it
was similar
one person's
to
lens.
Yeah, it was similar to her photography, though. The shots from the opening of the film.
And I'll give it that. So that's what I'll say about that situation.
So these arts, the people. Now that we know it's the 90s Black Renaissance, right? Because that goes into all the music and stuff and those tastes in music, right? Because R&B. You hear that accent coming out, y'all. Because R. Kelly was about to come out.
Shut up. He was already out.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm saying the word R. Kelly. So R. Kelly and them was out. R&B and hip hop. That is totally missing in the movie. You know what I'm saying? That's what most people will recognize as Black culture. But when you get in, I'm the artsy folks, and this is the Black Renaissance, and, you know, this great thriving of Black art, that's the music that's chosen.
And I think the hard thing is that, like, I would consider myself artsy minus the jazz and the neo soul, because that's just not my thing. But yeah, so that's why I would say I don't know, you know, but I'm not going to say that it couldn't have been somebody's experience there at that time. It just wasn't mine.
So they're sitting around those types of people who are really immersed in that part of the culture, which, you know, they were trying to highlight to say what's going on through film. They have the typical, I would say, male versus female discussion.
Yes. And but you pointed out to me that the discussion they have that's kind of like men versus women is based on this idea that God is a woman, you know, and it's kind of funny. And then you see Darius chime in.
You say I pointed out. What did I point out?
Well, no, you pointed out the male versus female earlier. Oh. That, you know, that dynamic.
Yeah,
and I was
because
saying that they were debating over whether God was a woman.
Yeah, so it's kind of like now, but now there's vitriol attached to it, right? So back in the day, you would have your comedians and all this stuff, right? And regular people, you would talk about it, but it wasn't like you were adversaries.
They talked wild about women. They're like, my wife always did, but they all had wives, and they, you know, were with them.
But are these people, right? They just like, a woman is only good in the kitchen. Some may really believe that, but it wasn't that I'm saying this because I hate you, right? Or y'all don't know how to blah, blah, blah.
It
wasn't
it's
anytime somebody come
like,
up with the y'all, then I already know I just tune them out at that point.
So the thing is that, you know, like it wasn't antagonistic, and they acknowledge their love and need for each other at the same time that they're taking comical digs, right? Which I think is like these long-lasting friendship and relationships. Like that's the nature of a lot of them.
It was really about communication, trying to understand each other, trying to tell each other their viewpoints and how they see things. Right? So it's like if you talk about, or the lady who we just saw, who had the hot dogs, right? And she was talking about her husband and how the package was resealable.
Yes.
But she turned it over and he done sliced the...
It was like a meme video, a little short video. And it was hilarious, though, because she starts out with this very, like, you know, the TV anchor voice. And she's like, everyone, we're here today in Another Day Married or something like that, right? And she's like, here we have Exhibit A. And then she shows the hot dog package. It's like 15, 20 hot dogs in this package. It's the giant family size. And then she's like, why the F is it sliced open? Oh, man, it was funny, but like, it's just true. But it doesn't add up to you hating your husband because he slices open the package. Or other people
using that to say, that's why you should be alone for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, there's just things that you eventually are going to accept. Like,
but the reason that just came to my mind, but I was thinking about the classic toilet seat discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's just...
Or another equivalent of toilet seat, like that's less gross and we don't have to talk about the bathroom, which is that like, all right. So there's one thing about domain and people like, oh yeah, the woman's domain is the kitchen. Da, da, da.
Oh yeah.
Like, okay, but there's also another reason that I don't like it when Heit goes in there and he's dealing in packages and stuff like that. Because especially bread, I don't know what it is about bread, but you just, for whatever reason, ain't gonna close it. It ain't gonna be closed
She's
up.
lying.
And
so
I just
she
like, I
throws
already
away
know.
the twisty. So what am I
Because
supposed
I know
to do?
how to loop it with my fingers. Like I got this
I
handle.
know how to loop it
Let me
too.
get you.
I
Let me
loop
get
it.
you
I
a
do
slice
not
of
leave
bread out of
bread
here.
open.
Because and then when I know I'll hear him in the kitchen and I'm in the other room and I'm like, I know he ain't closed that. And so then I'll
always
just go
close the
back
bread. I
in
do not
and
know
look,
where
it's
this came
open. I don't
from.
even say nothing anymore because it's not even a big enough deal
Bruh,
to be
that
like,
is-
oh my God, you didn't close
Yeah,
it.
but
Nah, it's just not a big deal.
Never a time in my life where I left the bread open. That's just
The lie
crazy.
detector determined that's a lie.
So you know what's be happening? She's doing it, and then women do it. Let's say that. Let's act like that, and they always blame the man.
Okay. But I wasn't
Because
in
it always,
there.
so we had a refrigerator that didn't always close all the
God,
way.
that was
and she would
horrible.
always try to blame me. And I'm like, how am I doing it when I'm never in the kitchen?
Let me tell y'all, do not get what kind of
Was it a
refrigerator was that? It
Whirlpool?
was a Whirlpool. It sure was. Don't get the Whirlpool bottom drawer kind of, like the stainless steel bottom drawer freezer. Do not. That freezer would close sometimes and sometimes not. And then you'd come in and it would just be just a crack open. But you
Look,
got ice and everything.
You know this thing is defective, and she always blamed me.
Man, I'm like, you got to
And
close
I think
the
the top
freezer.
couldn't always close right. either. You
Oh
had to
man, it
close
was
that
just a
certain
pain.
way.
I mean, that
But-
thing cost too much to be such a pain.
Yeah. So it's those types of discussions that were always brought up in comedy and stuff. And
Yeah.
this was just this banter of, women versus men.
But it
And
didn't mean
each
you
person-
hated them or that
Yeah,
let's
they were
segregate
all-
from them.
They
We
were,
don't need them.
I guess they were kind of friends, right? But the Sheila hanging out with the guys was just kind of weird to me. And I don't know if she was supposed
Yeah,
to
there
be
was
like
one girl with the guys, and then
which is very
Siobhan
different now.
had a wife, but
You
the
know,
wife wouldn't be
yeah.
with them all the time,
Yeah.
right?
You know what's funny though? They say you can't look at it at the lens of today.
Right.
But if I say there was a woman with them and that didn't seem right, then you'd be like, but there are people who are this way, gender. You know what I'm saying, right?
Well, whatever.
So then you got to be like, well, in today's, it's more acceptable now. And you look at it differently than you would in the 90s to just have a woman hanging out with all these men.
Yes.
So
And
yeah, but that was weird in the movie.
So just to kind of fast forward more about what's actually happening in the film. So, they go,
Yeah, but
they're
hold on
hanging.
before that. So another part of their discussion is that they seem to really respect quoting other people, right? Because your Darius and Nina, they go off to another date after the party is the after party.
Yeah.
But they always like to quote writers and stuff, and then they be really impressed with each other
Yes.
by these quotes.
He misquoted someone and then she was like,
Yeah.
you just made a fool of yourself. But see, that also happens when people are talking. See, it's probably pretty easy to impress people when you sound like you know what you're talking about. But then if you wind up talking to somebody who actually does know what they're talking about, then it becomes a
Yeah.
different thing. And it happens like a lot, right?
But that's the problem with quotes too. Quotes
That
are
is the problem
always-
with quotes.
And it's even worse now. If you try to find a source of a quote online, you're
Yeah.
going to get a whole assortment of people.
I remember being a teenager and I actually had like a hardbound book of quotes that I just loved. I
have
used to
one
just
right now.
read through that.
Maybe two.
I really used to just love reading quotes from other people. I don't know why that was an obsession during that time for me, but it was. But yeah, so they leave, they go to the after party, they dance at the reggae club, So they're getting closer
Oh, see,
together.
that was supposed to be the beneath us, because she brings this up later, right? That old reggae type club stuff that you brought me to was beneath me and beneath us, right? That's not very
You
cultured.
took me to that ratchet club.
Yeah, that's
you know?
basically what would be said
Which
today.
is okay. So what I'll say is I would think that somebody who is actually artsy is not just artsy on a pedestal only, right? It's if you're truly an artist,
No.
would recognize that there is art of all sorts.
No. It's all wrapped up.
Well, I recognize that that's how people take it, but
No,
definitely
I
do not
think-
agree with that.
Just go to any jazz artist right now, for the most part, they look down on Taylor Swift and those types because that's little simple music was not complex, and you know what I'm saying, not intelligent, and
or worse yet, if you don't even play an instrument, if you play an instrument and then you're comparing yourself to other people.
I gotta put this out there right now. Timberland, he's not that good.
But why back in the day I was like, can't yo feel
we thought he was good, but he's not.
You know what I'm saying, baby girl? Like all the, I was like, oh, he's a genius. And when I saw what he was doing, sometimes you just don't want to know how the sausage is made. We're talking about
before the AI stuff.
Yeah, before the AI stuff, but sometimes you just don't want to know how the sausage is made, because I suspect highly that the way he was doing. Yeah.
I think he changed once he got successful. Then he changed his process of making things to not making things. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we digress, but yeah.
But anyway, that's he took her to a reggae club. They got all hot and bothered. So then when they get back to Nina's home, he doesn't even go upstairs, right? Because the apartment is upstairs.
Well, yeah, they're kissing outside the building in public and everything like that, just tonguing each other down.
And then he's just trying to go upstairs so that they could smash. And Nina's basically like, I can't go out like that on the first night.
Yeah, not on the first night.
That's nothing nowadays. You ain't even got to know the dude.
Shut up.
But then what happens? She went out like that on the first night because Darius was just like, I just want to come up and talk.
I just want to talk, man. And you know what happened. Of course, they boned. So the next morning he gets up and he cooking breakfast and everything. And, so they're, chit-chatting and talking with each other.
He had nice fitting jeans on.
You said you didn't think his jeans were the right bagginess for the time.
Yeah, but after our whole discussion on who these people are supposed to be, I don't wear baggy pants,
Maybe. So then we see her back with her friend, Lisa Nicole Carson's character, Josie. And she admits to Josie that, they did the do, and her friend is teasing her. And she's like, well, I want to know all the details because, I'm not getting any right? And she's like, and she wants to know the size of, the eggplant.
Yeah.
And
she said it was like his work. Just talk to me.
Right. The D was talking to her. And Josie was like, what did it say? And she was like, it was calling her name. It was like, Nina. And, I just thought that was very funny. So she then got digmatized. And, that's basically it. So, but Nina makes it very clear, this is not love. And she and Darius are just kicking it. And let me, for those of you who have made it this far in the video, like a little over 30 minutes or whatever, let me just stop and say that another surprise about this video or this movie is that my sister is actually in the movie Love Jones. Yes, my sister, who I sometimes reference and talk about, my younger sister, who's, 4 years younger than I am, is in this movie, and it's coming up. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but just to give you that little teaser. So anyway.
So basically she's like, we just kicking it. And then we see that Darius is going holler at Savon, and Savon woman is just leaving them. They having an argument. And
leaving with the kid.
Yeah. And then he basically tells Savon what went on. And he's like, wow, the whole experience just basically defied description. And then Savon's like, wait, what? You made breakfast.
He's like, and he's feeling like in this moment that Nina could be the one, and then Savon tells him when that Jones comes down, it'd be a MFer, so he's letting him know already, like, look, when you fall, when it's love, when she the one, it's gonna, so.
But then what does Darius say? We just kicking it.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to admit it. So nobody wants to admit how they're actually feeling the other person and everything.
But I think that's kind of how now is.
Yeah, and
2025 is what
somebody made a comment. They're like, oh, somebody from, Gen X and older millennials talking about how there's no love no more. That's funny. Well, actually, if you look at the culture, you look at what people were putting out at the time, you look at what people were doing, they were at least in pursuit of love. Might not have been a whole lot of marriages happening, but,
it was still more than now.
It's still more than now, okay, amongst our culture. And
I just think across American culture,
but I mean, I'm talking about us because this is us. And so, but I'll say that, like, the idea that you feel silly to say you love somebody, or that you done fallen for them, or that you want to fall in love, right? Or that you want to feel butterflies about the person who you're into. Like, that doesn't have to be a silly thing. And back in the day, it wasn't uncool to actually admit that completely. But maybe this is an indicator that by 97, things were changing a little bit.
So then when you get basically, what reflects it in culture, things like hip hop, right? We like to be like, oh, art just reflects whatever culture or society. When you got songs like, bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks, blah, blah, blah. And that shit, like, that was going on for about 10 years at this time, right? So that's going to permeate. And I think some of that is what actually happened.
Right. I do think some of that did rub off. And then I also will say, since we were kind of on the kind of bougie and what word would I use?
Bougie and regular.
Kind of the bougie versus regular people sort of thing. I would say that there are people who engaged in hip hop, but not from all right, I'll just be flat out. You know how most of the people who were buying hip hop music, even back in the day, were white people, white suburban kids and stuff like that. Like, but they have a different experience listening to hip hop. Like, it's like playing a video game, right?
Yeah.
For them, they get to feel empowered by something that they don't know firsthand. And I will say that even though you can relate to it more because you're Black and some of the other things that are being talked about, if this ain't your culture and lifestyle, and I mean by culture, I mean the subculture, right? Because Black people are not all the same. So if it's not your subculture, you are still also living kind of through the excitement of that. I remember being a teen and, we all rapping music about stuff that none of us knew. Well, I can't say none. Most of us had no clue about that as a firsthand experience on any level. So there's that to be acknowledged in kind of understanding these particular types of Black people are.
Yeah. But like seeing Brown Sugar, it was more like hip hop had gained some respect, right, amongst I guess a different type of culture or class, right? So then it was basically based on, this is based on hip hop and how this is true art and flourishing art. But at the time, it took a minute before people really acknowledged that. And I realized why I made that point. The point I was making is that, what you do for enjoyment and fun and art can be also very separate when that connection isn't made, right? So I'm not saying all women are, hoes and whatever, right? But I may be consuming that as art, but that's like fantasy in the same way as any movie I might have watched, a Jason movie back in the day, Friday the 13th or Freddy Krueger or whatever, right? Yeah.
That it's fantasy, so it's not real, but yet and still it permeated on some level because to some people this is how they were operating. So, and this is why I think there might have still been some time, and even to today, I mean, I know plenty of people who that is not their reality that they're operating with.
But that's what art is supposed to be too.
Yeah.
So basically, after he leaves Savon, then somehow Nina's at Darius's home, and it's not clean.
It's just junky and full of books unkept, and all kind of things. And, looks like people would see that and say it needs a woman's touch, which is unfortunately a very chauvinistic thing to say, like she's the maid or something. But it's probably what somebody would have said in that time.
So then, we find out he's a Renaissance man. He was a DJ. So I'm like, what music was he playing?
House. He's from Chicago. He was playing house music. And Lorenz Tate is from Chicago, right? Lorenz Tate is from Chicago. So, but I don't know, because he maybe is, such a young actor when he got in the scene. Like, how much did you go to Chicago public schools and stuff, or were you just born there, kind of thing? Are you more Hollywood or Chicago? I don't know.
It's who more Hollywood?
Lorenz Tate.
Maybe Hollywood was more Hollywood. They called him, Bill Bellamy's character.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the actor?
The actor, Lorenz Tate, is from Chicago.
Oh,
so
okay.
I felt like certain things that should have been. That's what I'm saying. So I think he did kind of leave early-ish though, or whatever. So I don't know. Like, I was thinking, why didn't he sense certain things that felt less Chicago-like about this film? But anyway,
because it's different probably too. If you're an adult in a place, if you leave when you're a kid, you really don't know what it's like being an adult in a place.
That's true. So basically, to kind of push through more of what's going on between them, Nina's over at his house and whatever, and she's taking pictures because, she is a photographer. She's like, take off your clothes. He slowly disrobes and, they get it on again.
Somebody done that to me, but I didn't take my clothes off. And it was video.
Shut up. Khalil Kane. Who would do that?
Crazy people.
Khalil Kane is playing Nina's ex, who shows up at her door begging for her back. And he's like, I got a train ticket to New York. So he wants her to come to
out of nowhere. Like, what is this?
Yes. He wants her to come to New York and like stay with him and be with him and, so that they won't be broken up anymore. And so she tells Josie about, this and everything like that. And she's like, well, I still need to know if I still love him and whatever. So Josie's like, well, are you going to tell Darius? And Nina's like, well, I don't want to lie to him. And I said, oh, okay, I really like her approach that she doesn't want to lie to him. And so then Josie tells her, well, tell Darius, and if he snaps, then you got him, right? So his response is going to determine how he feels about you, which is bad advice from a friend. Some of y'all friends be leading y'all into the wrong spot.
Some of these TikTokers y'all be watching be leading y'all wrong too. So
you got to watch who you listening to, because every man ain't going to be like that, right? So you would think, that, oh, if he seems jealous, but see, everybody's not going to respond the same way. Yeah. And that really burned her, but she listened to her friend. And so Nina tells him, I'm going to New York next week. And, I got some work contacts. I'm going to try to get a gig. And, I also need to take care of some unfinished business, with my ex. And, the only reason I'm telling you is because I really care about you and I'm just not trying to play you.
But if you tell me that, then just go. Don't come back over here, right?
Yeah, so look, that's what he basically says.
She basically like, hey, I'm going to New York because I got some unresolved things with my ex. Wait,
what?
And
he's just basically like, it's cool, go do what you got to do, and she's like, well, are you mad? And he says he's not mad. Now, she's asking, are you mad? Because she's trying to gauge if he really cares. Because if he seems like he cares, I think maybe she might not have gone, right? But you can't be making your decisions on the basis of what somebody else would do. Yeah. And I feel
I base my decision on the fact that she told me that she was going to New York to be with her ex.
As opposed to, I mean, so I just thought she was just like ridiculous in this moment.
Yeah, it was.
And so you made your decision, go do what you're going to do or whatever. But like, if you think you could come back after you resolve whatever you resolved and, you get boned and it didn't feel the same, then you come back to Darius like, nah, that's just not going to work out. So,
so then Darius went to Savon, with...
Oh, but let me just say this one thing before that. So, and then he says to her, he's like, well, it's cool. I'm not mad. We're just kicking it, right? We just friends, right?
I should have named it Just Kicking It.
Just kicking. Yeah, but like you said, he goes back to his friend.
Yeah, he went to Savon and he's just basically with his ego like, nah, it's because she can't hang, right? But then they talk more and Darius ends up like, I think she the one.
Yeah.
And then Savon is like, really? And then Darius, he can't, he can't admit it. His pride is in the way because you're not supposed to say that you into someone or love someone at that point in the 90s. I don't know. But, then he just Darius just act like he's joking. And I'm like, does Savon believe him though when he does that?
I think Savon is worried about the fact that his own wife ain't at the crib, and he's kind of like, I just think he's not completely invested one way or the other in whether he believes it. But
it is at this point that we realize that Darius thinks she's the one.
Yes.
So then he go home and she has my train leaves at blah blah message. I'm going.
No. That's not even what happens, right? What happens is he catches the eye of a chick while he's at that same bar with Savon, and then he picks up a chick at the bar. Meanwhile, Nina's done left her message, and then she's like, my train, blah, blah. And then she goes to New York. So he was like, I got to make myself feel good because the girl that I was feeling has abandoned me. And I think he was right to feel bad. Honestly, I ain't saying you should have got with old girl. I'm just saying that's pretty messed up.
She's going to be with her ex. What you
right?
I
mean, if that's what you want to do, but again, it can enthrall you in situations that might not be the best thing to do in there, because what if that chick is looking for something and and you emotional and you said something you didn't mean, and but anyway,
so
then
Nina's in New York.
Yes, she's in New York, and then the guy that one of her contacts that she's gone see, he's like, you'll have a better chance if you were more polished,
more slick,
more slick and whatever. So she gets up and she like, whatever. And so Nina is staying with her ex in New York.
It's like, wait, y'all gonna just break this on us? This is like Tyler Perry level writing going on though. But she is she is staying with her ex. She went to New York. So is she staying with the photographer whom she worked for in Chicago, and then when she go to New York, she's sleeping on her ex's couch, or she's sleeping in his bed? Yeah, it's
she's
very
sleeping
weird.
in his bed. She was sleeping in his bed.
Oh.
So that was the intent, and that was his intent when he invited her, because he was like, I want you to come and stay with me. What you think that mean with your ex that you've been sleeping with for the last however many years y'all been together?
So he's Marvin. Right? Yeah. So Marvin, where am I?
Well, they argue, right? Because he's not really caring about her career. He's like, I got us, I'm doing good or whatever. And, she's like, all we have is a lot of years, but nothing else. We got time on the books, but, you're not interested in my career and me doing, not that she expects him to just be like that, but he just doesn't seem supportive, right?
Yeah, but just the fact that they didn't even show them interacting that much. And I'm like, this isn't working. Because basically there was an argument started over some toasted oats.
Mm-hmm.
So then Marvin wakes up and Nina left her ring?
Her engagement ring on his pinky finger.
When were they engaged?
They were engaged at the whole time.
So Darius was with this lady with an engagement ring on?
No, he probably gave it back to her, right?
See, that don't even make sense.
He probably gave it back to her when she got there. I don't know.
Because she was like, Darius he wasn't mad, so I'm gonna marry this dude Marvin.
Well, right. So she's not making the decision based on what she actually wants. She's making the decision like, well, he wasn't mad, so this guy isn't that into me. I got all these years with this other guy. Maybe I should give him a chance. So I'm expecting the scene we didn't see was when she went, and then he's like, here's the ring back, baby. We gonna make it work and whatever. As soon as she gets off the plane in New York,
none of that stuff.
And then because how else did she get the ring? I doubt he got on his knee he already had been proposed.
I'm gonna just say it's
he's
not
like,
great
just put it back
filmmaking.
on.
That's why I'm gonna put that.
Yeah.
So I'm not making up nothing. So basically, she left him over some toasted oat.
So she leaves the ring behind and she leaves him. So
and then she's done with him. Chicago and she see Darius hooked up with that lady.
Walking down the street or whatever, and
so how did Nina end up being able to take pictures? Right? Because she seemed like the gopher for the other photographer. The next thing you know, Hollywood shows up where she's working.
Yeah, I think that she quit her job in between, like after the guy threw the lunch and all that. I feel like something happened that went on and we just don't fully know. Go to the comments if you're one of these people, because some of y'all be like, I watched this every day for a year.
Yeah.
Tell me
I don't really care
if I
about
missed a
deleted
little
scenes
piece
too, though.
About that. Make it all make sense for us. So, but Nina,
so Hollywood show up there, and then somehow she goes on a date with Hollywood, who is Darius's friend.
Right. After he shows up at her job.
Yeah. Why is she going on a date with him?
He trying to holler and everything like that. Holler at the club. And why dude drives a hearse though? But anyway, so she goes out though.
Yeah.
She just literally goes out. And I was like, okay, you already know what the deal is.
Yeah. And then because if somebody's friends, you've seen that they hang together too. So then when you go somewhere with this dude, then that other dude is going to be there. but whatever. She's a skeezer, and
Oh,
they
now
have
you
this
did.
all this contrived tension between Hollywood and Darius because word gets around, but like I think they just needed that for some reason. I don't know. Like this kind of messed the movie up for me.
Yes.
But I guess it brings some drama.
It does. It brings a little drama. It makes it seem a little scandalous or whatever. At this point in the film, we don't know if they're now sleeping together or whatever. I think she just, Hollywood was being so aggressive that she was like, well, okay, I guess, kind of thing. Like, I'm not saying she went out with enthusiasm or whatever. She was just being entertained by this guy. And it just is whatever. But I still think it was too close for comfort. But then sometimes I think about the way that, like, hey, from the little hamlet that you're from, since we always joke about that, from the little town you're from, you told me, you said everybody is somebody's ex. So what about that aspect of it?
The aspect of it's the ex of one of your close friends who you always hang out with.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing.
Yeah. And what about some onus on Hollywood? Like, that was stupid. Like, why is it okay for you to just now run up behind your friend? And, like, I didn't like that.
Yeah, well, they already established him as a bad character because the way he talked about women.
Yeah.
The first thing.
So Darius is trying to write his book, and he's getting frustrated or whatever. And then Savon calls him and tells him, oh, I bet you ain't know Hollywood was talking to Nina now. So this is where we find this out, And then now we back to the club. And now we're back to my sister, her big scene in the movie with no talking parts. But we were all so excited back in the day. We used to be like, my sister, my daddy used to be like, my daughter is in Love Jones. But basically, the club is where they always would be seeing each other. And so they're, leaving in and out of the club.
Hollywood, he comes into the club. Right?
Darius is already there.
Yeah, so they showing that he's I don't know, maybe a womanizer or a ladies' man, maybe. But he going in, he's hugging women and stuff on the way, and that all his friends are side eyeing him,
right,
as he enters.
And my sister is the woman he hugs when he walks in the club. So do we have that scene?
Your sister is a pretty good actress in the
I know,
little role she
hugged
had.
him. I remember back when she recorded this. At the time, and what's funny is she was in high school.
Oh.
So yeah, she was still in high school when she filmed this, actually. I think she was a senior. And she also was, was extra in another movie with Sidney Poitier, To Serve with Love. And, if you want to catch her again, she's in a scene toward the end where
she's in a scene with him.
Yes, next to him. And I was like, how did you get right next to him? Now, let me tell you something that she told me about this particular movie, Love Jones. She said that they wanted to put her in the background because this isn't the only place she appears in the scene. If you're watching, she appears in a lot of these club scenes throughout the film. And she said it was because they were like, oh my God, I just love your hair, your hair, your hair. And, basically her hair was kind of like Lisa Nicole Carson's hair at the time, except Lisa Nicole Carson's hair was more loosely blown out, but she wore natural hair. And they seemed to really like that. And they were like, you come here. And that's how she got in these scenes at the time. I mean, because she was there with other extras and, they just decide who they want to be in the scene. And I was like, you got to hug Bill Bellamy. Because at the time, too, Bill Bellamy is like a hot comedian at the time. Def Comedy Jam has specials and stuff like that, movies, How to Be a Player. I don't remember what year How to Be a Player
I think that was
97.
But,
Okay. Yeah. So, all of that. So anyway, I digress. But, I had to give my sister her 15 minutes over here too. But, but yeah. And yes, with my sister, my actual blood sister that I grew up with. But anyway, so that was that. So this is more tension between Darius and Hollywood, though. And Darius, basically tells him off politely because they have this banter back and forth and, about that they both are with this same chick.
It was like they were friends and stuff before. Then all of a sudden, Hollywood is just acting crazy towards Darius. It just didn't make sense to me.
So, So then
they have a get together
they
again,
do.
a party actually this time.
A party this time. So they're at the party, and then Sheila's the one who opens up the door. So I was thinking maybe it's Sheila's house and it's her party. So Darius,
Savon shows up with another woman,
not his wife. And Darius is like, bro, who is this chick? And Savon says, this is a woman that he works with or whatever. And Darius is like, but you married and your wife is a good woman.
And Savon is like, all y'all told me not to get married.
Mm-hmm.
But then Darius put this music reference. I also said the Commodores would get back together. Who knew? And so I know this guy. He's a poet and whatever, right? But he's also into music big, right? Mm-hmm. But he talk about how he don't like Lionel Richie, and once he came out with one of those songs as a solo artist, he was like, I knew.
All night long.
He knew. He was like, I knew the Commodores were broken up.
That first album, right? Like, yeah. I think maybe Truly, all those songs that were on the what album was that? It probably don't matter. But
it don't matter.
Okay. Yeah. But, all those songs that were kind of on that album where he was making it big, probably around like 83-ish, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know how big of a deal that was. Because also, I'm not really into funk like that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
But yeah, the Commodore is breaking up. So he makes that reference or whatever. And then Savon says, falling in love ain't ish. Somebody tell me how to stay there, right? And so it's this idea that, you could fall in love. And, I'm sure all of y'all know somebody who just easy to fall in love. They crazy about whoever they going to be with. And then when the newness
on social media, it's always some new guy. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? And it's always the same thing. He's the greatest. And nobody blah, blah, ever did and this that. And that. And then you got another baby.
There you go.
And then he's gone. And then it happens again over and over. Like, dang, what's going on?
So I thought that was like really poignant that he was like, tell me how to stay there. Although I do think that he was on the right track because he was with his wife. They got the kid and everything. And the kid is not like a baby, 10 years old, maybe, something like that. So they got some time under their belt. And I think what he's realizing is what anybody who's in any long-term relationship with, that the feeling of love versus this euphoric constant high, that you can't, even if you do drugs, you're not high the same, you're not going to stay high. It's an unrealistic expectation.
Well, that's
that
what
every
the
second
title
of the day
points to, right? That's basically what a Jones is. Yeah. Right. So
it equates it with that.
Yeah. So you don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Who?
So you're chasing, just like you might be chasing that feeling that the Jones gives you. You're chasing that feeling. Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, Nina in Hollywood is on a date again, and
they show up to the party.
Yeah, because he's like, yo, just going to some place. Some
and
friends
he won't tell her.
Yeah, but if his friends having a party, then who else would it be?
So they show up to this same party. Now, Darius has left the room. And then when he comes back to the room, then he sees her there, there with his friend. And it's just a mess. And so she's pissed because she's like, you ain't tell me where we were going. And now we showing up like here. And, and clearly Hollywood doesn't care about her. He just wants to, flaunt her in the face of Darius. And so she's like, let's go outside and talk. And they go outside. And she's like, I want to go home. Are you going to take me home and whatever?
And he said, hell no.
Hell no. And then so she was like, fine, then I'm going to go. So she walks off into the dark. Darius.
And Hollywood walks back in alone.
Yes.
And it's basically like, where's Nina? Well, she ain't coming back in. So then Darius have to run after her to walk her home, have to convince her to that.
Well, and then he was like, I'm trying to make sure you get home safe. So it's like the whole, like, I'm ready to get,
I just want to talk. Again.
Yeah. So he gets wild. So then they go, he's like, I'm going to call a cab and whatever, So he gets loud with her for a second. And then they get to the cab thing and then he can't hold it in. He's just like, he goes in and he's like, and how you going to just be dating my friend? And, he was salty, right?
Yeah. So then when they have this argument and stuff, though, about just the way they frame the shot, you have the negative look space And what it kind of looks like is, so like Nina is on the left side of the screen, the far left, and she's looking off left. If you watch movies, that don't usually happen. You're going to be looking in the direction where it's most space. The side of the screen that has the most space between the subject and the end of the screen, right? But I'm like, okay. And Darius, he kind of was like off-putting. He wasn't at a third or whatever. He was kind of had that negative look space too. But yeah, that's just something I noticed. And I'm like, it was well placed right there. And I don't know how often this was really done back then.
So they both at home, lonely on a rainy night, and Nina calls Darius. She apologizes to him. And then she asks him out to a Dusty Steppers set, basically. And
real culture.
Yes,
right?
yes. I was like, okay, you got a little Chicago in there now, Dusty stepping. And so they go out. And then, they start talking. You see the Dusty stepping scene. And then they started talking. By the way, neither of them could Dusty step. I'm just saying. And they were a little kind of young for the Dusty step. Because at that point, I remember the people who were into Dusty stepping were, like maybe closer to our parents' age.
Was this us. The last slow dancing in a movie?
It might have been
in a black movie.
We getting real close. Is that
considered slow dancing, or I don't know, just couple dancing?
Because from then, everybody now is just
what it reminds me of.
That's it.
Because I think that still kind of happens maybe in Chicago, but it does remind me of Zydeco, where I'm from.
Yeah. Okay, so that's still couples dancing, and people still do that, and younger people can.
It ain't in movies
you see
though.
It happening. No, it's not.
Before trail rides got all popular and stuff, there was this thing going on in Louisiana that's still going on. But yeah.
So, so she then explains as they're walking after their date night or whatever. She's like, I wanted to call when I got back from New York, and then you were with that girl and whatever. And then Darius is just like, look, let's just cut to the chase. Look, we got this destiny type of thing. And so then, of course.
So they go back to Nina's place, and then she basically like, you sleep on the couch. See, that's just like, why? Why couldn't he just go home? You just had to make this awkward situation for this scene to play out the way that the writer wanted it to play out. So basically, he's on the couch, and they all both hot and bothered and stuff, and he putting his hand in his pants or in the
he like, no, I can't do that.
And then she is just, I don't know what you call it, where you just tossing and turning. That's what she's doing. And then he just goes upstairs because he's always been like a creep. You know what I'm saying? He was stalking her at the beginning of the movie. So he's just like, fuck it, I'm going to just go up there. And this is a very dangerous situation.
Like, quietly,
if you really don't plan on doing something, don't do that.
He sneaks up the stairs like he's trying
to be quiet. Or nothing.
Which at least if he made himself be known, like made noise as he was walking up, she'd be like, oh, here he come right now. She just is startled because he's in her room, like, Nina, let me play something for you.
Yeah, get on.
Well, whatever. And you know what happens next.
And then they smash. And then they have a whole date montage and stuff in the middle of
as
it.
You're fast forwarding through all of this and everything like that.
Next thing you know, they live together. What?
Well, and they're not. They still have their own quote unquote places.
They ain't got.
But they are.
She ain't got no place. We already established.
Well,
this.
they were at her place when they have the argument, and he's like, "Go, get your stuff out my house." Well, okay, maybe she just
for her new
stereo
boss.
house sits. So
they wasn't living together, and why would they move to his place like instead of her place?
They were always just kind of going back and forth.
She had the key though. That was a big part of it.
They stayed the nights at each other's place, so neither one of them gave up where they were, but they were going to be together every night.
They was just kicking it, okay.
So
and then out of nowhere they just start having problems.
Yeah. I mean, well, what happens is she starts getting a little weird because she sees signs of the other woman at his house. Now, he's not the type who's going to just be trying to hide or conceal anything. So the other woman who he used to date who briefly dated while she was going to be with her ex, had left her phone number up on the little board at his house and, just little remnants.
He answered a call at night.
She called at 5 a.m.
Well, how you know it was her? I say he answered a call.
Well, okay.
Right? And this is what's arousing her suspicion and stuff.
Well, and then he answers and he's like, do you know what time it is? Because he's saying it whispering, thinking she's asleep. And of course, in every movie like this, as soon as you think she's asleep and she opens her eyes right after, right? To let you know she heard that call too.
I still feel it's out of nowhere.
So,
because then he's just like, basically he don't want to be bothered with her because he's trying to write and stuff, and it's just another one of those contrived things, just like I thought.
Well, the
with
thing
Hollywood and
is,
Darius.
it's at this point, it's in her head because, you know, they haven't established where they are and what they're doing. And they're both saying, you know, like you're living like it's progressing, but you haven't actually said the words.
Yeah, but I'm saying in the movie, I ain't seen none of that stuff. It's just out of nowhere. They just start showing us a barrage of problems, which isn't a way you unfold a story. Well, typically
that's how it went down. And so because she is nervous about the fact that he maybe could still be seeing this other girl, or there could be somebody in his life, she doesn't come straight out and say what it is. So here we are with this communication issue again. And you know, she finally asks him, though, she's like, well, do you think that I slept with Hollywood or Wood or whatever? And he's like, I have learned not to ask questions that I don't want to know the answer to. And so then they get into this whole thing, and she says that she doesn't trust him.
Yeah, but he does the whole thing she did. He pick up the camera, and then he's like, take off your clothes. And she's like, nah. And then Darius like, what? You don't trust me? She says, no. Mm-hmm. Right?
And then he like, all right, I ain't got to deal with this. Why you want to be with somebody you don't trust? Let's just be over.
Yeah, she says, you have not gave me a reason to trust you. And yeah, but then Darius is just like, well, you the one who went to New York, fucked your ex, and then you got with my boy.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't even.
Everything we've seen in the movie,
I want to side with
her.
the woman and have the empathy, but like, she just like you don't want to make these moves. Yeah. But then you're worried about another chick when you left him. That's crazy. Yeah. So
so then they basically like, yeah, well, whatever, get out my life. But the funniest part is he's like, yeah, shut my door all the way when you leave.
Mm-hmm. And so she does. She got her stuff, gave the keys, and you know, I guess she shut his door when she left. So Darius tells his friend, the guy from
Savon.
Yes, not Savon. He tells his friend, the one from Drumline.
Oh, Eddie.
Tells him that, you know, basically he thinks he messed up twice in life. So there was apparently another girl before Nina.
The one who picture he had sitting on his desk, probably.
And he messed it up because he couldn't just say how he felt about her, basically, is what it boils down to. And that's the same problem. He repeated the same mistake. And
even though he's a poet.
Yeah, wild, huh? And so then
Savon's wife came back.
Yeah, his wife came back. And meanwhile, Nina is depressed and chain smoking, and Darius is trying to write his book and he's frustrated. And then next thing we know, Josie calls Darius to say Nina is on the noon train tomorrow because she got a Vibe magazine shoot. And, you know, so Darius is like, I don't care, whatever, you know, hangs up the phone. But of course, at the very last minute, Darius decides to rush to the train station to try to catch her at this last minute. He going down the escalator the wrong way, pushing people over, running next to the train. She doesn't see him, and the train just keeps going.
And we can see him in the window behind her.
Running. And like, she's there, she doesn't see him.
Cherie say black people don't ride the train.
Okay. The L, yes. Okay, so we're talking like the Amtrak type of train. Because I'm like, okay, in 1997, why are you taking the train from Chicago to New York? That's a little weird.
She was couch surfing, so
you know,
it's probably cheaper.
Well, the train is more expensive than the airplane.
Was it?
Yes, you could have been on a Southwest flight. I know because I flew a lot back then. Because you know I'd have to go back and forth to college and stuff.
Okay, well, Vibe was probably paying for it.
Well, but still, it takes longer to get there. And if it's for business, why would you want to take a 24-hour train ride, an 18-hour train? It just, I don't know. So anyway,
18 hours, really?
Let me see how long is the Amtrak train ride from Chicago to New York.
You cannot apply today's logic to yesterday's movie.
Yeah, but the tracks are still the same from back then.
The way they do things ain't. You know what time we live in now. They don't give a damn about your time. And that just get worse and worse every year.
27 hours.
See? It's even longer than you thought.
Okay, the shortest is 20 hours. Bruh. So the shortest is 20 hours, and I'm assuming that's like a direct or whatever.
But also, they probably had more trains back then, too.
It doesn't matter.
It does, because they could have some that's express that go straight, and then
this one here nowadays, says fast.
Whatever.
And it's
they
20
still
hours.
Probably stopping at 4-5 places along the way.
They're going to stop at every place along the way.
Yeah,
But okay, so like 20 hours versus even with the time difference, what would be end to end in the air, like 2.5 hours mostly. You know, like, why? But anyway, it doesn't have to make sense. This is how the movie is. She's just, we take trains, whatever. I just wanted to take a minute and let you all know about axiom.app. That is our site where you can find all of our recent videos in one place. You can see them on the screen right now. And this is through all of our different channels so that it's all in one place. And then if you click on them, it's going to link you back to YouTube where you'll be able to watch the video here on YouTube. So it's just a convenience because I know some of you are subscribed to one channel and maybe not the other and so on, and you don't always get notifications. So this is a way where you can always know what's new on our channel. And there's a similar page that if you are a member, whether that's on Patreon here on YouTube or, even through our site, you'll be able to have access to a page that's similar to this that will show you all of our member videos as well. And at the top of this page, also, if you're interested in the deep dive on demand, then you can see that at the top of the page, you just click support financially, and it'll take you to a page where you can either order your own deep dive on demand for $50, and that's where you choose the movie, or you can just scroll down and the page will load the co-executive producer deep dive on demands that we have available here. And those are just $25 each. And so with these, you don't pick the movie, you'll pick from the movies that we have available here. And as you can see, the ones that are already taken are grayed out at the bottom. But I just wanted to explain that to some people who may not be aware. And we welcome any of your deep dive on demands, and be sure to visit axiom.app. That's really going to be your touch point for everything for us. And if we ever lose touch here on this platform, you'll be able to see and keep up with us. So,
yeah, he didn't make it, and she just goes to New York. So
then we just get this thing 1 year later. So she's living in New York. She got a good little job, and now she's, her assistant comes in and is like, here's your train tickets again, probably for your shoot in Chicago. So now we know she's going back. Darius done wrote his book and everything like that.
And it's published already.
So they each went and worked on themselves, though, in this year. Now, nobody picked up a phone to call anybody else in this time and whatever. Yeah. I just thought that was interesting.
He wanted her so bad, but
neither one of them said anything.
Hey, Josie, what's her number so I could call her in New York?
Exactly. So Darius admits to Savon that he thought it would make him feel like a fool to show how much he cared and all of that. He stopped smoking, right? Because he's done wrote his book, Stop Smoking. So, like, he's really, glowed up a little bit. And Nina, though, she goes to the club because she's looking for Darius, and she sees a man who has Darius's book, and she's like, oh, dang, he done wrote the book and everything. And then she looks, and the book is dedicated to the woman who helped me reach my level. You know who you are. And of course, she's like, oh, it's me. Now, wouldn't it have been funny if it was the other chick that he's still dating her, and now they get on and he's marrying her? But anyway, that's not how the movie goes. So Nina takes the mic and she gets on stage and everything, and she does poetry on stage. Okay, I'm gonna just keep it real. I didn't enjoy this piece, but okay. I know I might get ate up. I
uncultured. She's uncultured.
I didn't enjoy
y'all.
it. I didn't. Like I said, I've been to.
Him.
I just
in this
didn't.
Movie.
So, but before she gives it, she says, it's funny what you can do in a room full of people that you can't do in front of one person. And I just like, what you mean? And I guess because
the same with Darius, right? He couldn't just say, yo, I love you, you're the one and stuff, right? He has to say whatever through his poetry, and that's basically what she was doing. She couldn't also express that to him, and she
communication problems. But you know what I wonder, does it have anything to do with like your personality type? I see both of them as being extroverted types, right? And so the extrovert to me is always the person who, is performing for the crowd, whereas somebody like, I think you and I have this in common, that we're actually both introverts, believe it or not, even though we do this type of thing.
Yeah, so I'm not sharing anything one-on-one or to a crowd, so
well, and where I'm a little different because we're not the same type of extroverts. They have multiple types.
Introvert.
Excuse me, we're not the same type of introverts. There are multiple types. He's the one who's like not gonna say anything.
Why are you laughing so hard?
I'm laughing because people who have known you for years have said to me, they'll be like, and he's so quiet. He's always so quiet. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This dude never stops talking.
Wow.
You know, and I don't mean that like in a, you know, in any insulting sort of way, but like we talk a lot. And it's weird to me when people suggest that you don't talk, but I've seen you in these situations and kind of how you are, and I get why they think that. So I'm just like, okay, I feel a little privileged that, you know, we have that kind of vibe. For me, I've always been like, I'm better one-on-one, but my battery will expire quickly for that.
I haven't seen that, but okay.
You don't think my battery expires quickly?
No.
Well, in the social settings with other people, it does.
Oh, you mean group? You said one-on-one.
But so that's why I'm better one-on-one.
My battery has never expired.
If I'm one-on-one, I can be on the phone for 3 hours. But yeah, but I've always been like, yeah, I'm better one-on-one. Like I just forge relationships with people individually. I am not like the group person. So it's very bizarre that we would wind up as this is being I guess I would call it a facet of our career, you know, but anyway.
I think a lot of so-called YouTubers are like that though.
Mm-hmm. And then people are like, oh, can we talk? Do you want to see that? You don't want to meet these people in person. You don't.
Yeah, you don't want to meet me in person and try to have a conversation with me. No,
we've actually met people in person. We've been recognized in public. Well, he has been recognized in public. We were out at an all-you-can-eat buffet of all things.
That's crazy.
Yes, it was very weird. And I was like, ooh, I don't like this.
Cheri, somebody went and sought out Cheri though.
Yeah, that was a little bizarre too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, so I think you can get a little test of how you respond to those things. But back to Darius and Nina, I think that maybe this is why, like, they didn't have enough practice one-on-one other than, you know, smashing. Because to me, I always feel like it's never been a difficult thing for me to express how I feel to a person that is affectionate, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if it's like express, oh, you hurt my feelings, or, you know, those kind of weird, awkward things, maybe a little more difficult, but I still get around to it. Whereas they are just like, man, y'all love each other. Why can y'all just, or even if you don't have to be like, I love you and love you and love you, you know, you ain't got to be like that, but you could be like, look, we doing this thing, right? Right? Okay.
No, you do, because the other person wants that. That's where most of the issues come from, right? Because love, is not just this emotion. Love is the actions and behavior of the person towards someone or something. So if he don't say, I love you, then he must not love you, right? And we have this conversation of, oh, is somebody your friend or not because they're exhibiting certain behavior. That's basically the same thing, just put it more romantically, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, oh, they didn't say this thing or do this thing, that means they do not love you, because it's not really. It's like, just think about a thing like hunger, right? Or, yeah, let's just say hunger. If I can explain to you how it feels to be hungry, right? But you're like, oh, you didn't grab your stomach, so you're not really hungry. And that's kind of how it is with the love thing. And I think a lot of times either side, right, will be like, this person didn't say or do this thing, so that means that they don't have this feeling.
Right. Yeah. So Nina just, you know, is like, oh, I was hoping somebody would be here talking about Darius, but I don't see him anywhere.
And he was there.
So she says her part. He's shocked she's on stage and everything. He's like, whoa, you know. So afterwards, she's just about to leave because she doesn't see Darius. So it's raining outside. She's about to get in her cab. Darius steps out of the shadows and he's like, Nina. And she turns around and she sees him and she's getting wet there in the rain. And, you know, then they get to talking and he's like, look, we both made a lot of mistakes. He apologizes and he wants them to be together again for as long as we can be, he says. And as usual, she tells him, your timing couldn't be worse. I live in New York. And he like, I don't care. This right here is all that matters to me. I love you. And that's urgent like an MFer. And, you know, that's the big line from the movie.
But it was a play. I don't even remember what it was, but that urgent line was a play on something. Something to do with urgency. I don't even remember. Sorry, y'all.
So she's like, how do we do this? I live in New York. And he's like, whatever. They kiss in the rain.
It's just over.
She tells him she loves him, and it fades to black. So they both have admitted that they love one another, and presumably at least they can move forward. And that was it.
But nothing brought them back together besides them missing each other. That was it. Their issues weren't resolved.
Well, look, she had to aggress both times. She talked to him from the beginning, and she was the one who went to that club. They wouldn't have got back together if she never showed up there, because he was not getting ready to call Josie.
But they're not going to last. It's over anyway.
Well, y'all think they last? Go to the comments and let us know. Do you think they lasted as a couple? And then I also want to just acknowledge that Anton Colvin, who is one of the executive producers for this video, wanted us to really talk about the theme of communication in relationships and how that played in this film. And we've kind of weaved that in, through, but I just wanted to acknowledge that was one of the things he wanted us to discuss. Yeah,
we kind of touched on it a lot, but I don't understand. What is the communication if you weren't kind of together? They expressed that they just kicking it, right? But it's sort of like when you live in separate, what is there really to have issues about? Deciding what we're going to eat or where we're going to go. You know what I'm kind of trying to say?
Yeah.
But then when you move in together, then you got all the other things. Oh, it's hot. It's cold.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You get
close
along?
The door. You didn't close the refrigerator door.
I think the bigger thing is just communicating what it is you want. But in order to communicate that, you got to know what you want too.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, Nina is nursing a broken heart. She is just coming out of a breakup. She's on the rebound. She's not looking for that right now. She's like, let me just start over. Let me focus on myself. Let me get my career together.
So most people don't know what they want anyway, right?
Well, that's problematic.
I hate to say it. What's that dude name who died? Kevin Samuels, right? Where he's basically like, what you want? And then it's like 6'2", blah, blah, 6 figures. And you don't know what you want or what's good for you, or you don't know how to express it. And I'm not saying it's just women. That's just a good example I can have.
I mean, I think men can be that way too. It's just a people thing, right? And
you really don't know.
Part of knowing what you want and being able to figure that out has to do with definitely figuring out what you don't want and trying to avoid that. And I just think people think it takes a whole lot more to make them happy than it really does. That's honestly what I think. I think it's more simple than people make it. But you rather make it hard. I think that's just what it boils down to.
And you could express what you want, you get that, and then it don't work out, but then it's somehow something else was wrong when that's not what you wanted, and you haven't assessed what you actually wanted, even after getting what you supposedly wanted.
Well, you get it. But see, I think it's also the search for happiness and fulfillment. I want to have this career. I want to have money. I want to have the couple's goals. I want it all. How do I get it all? Because I feel like that's going to make me happy. But if you ain't happy, you ain't going to be happy even when you get it all.
But that's not what you want, right? Because it's that. Oh, I want a good job where I make a lot of money. Yeah, you didn't really think about it. Because you can have that, right? And what if you do that and you have a boss like Nina had? No, you're making your 6 figures, but you're not going to be. So you need to be more specific. You really need to figure out. It ain't just a career, a good a relationship, a career, a relationship, right? It's much more. And we live in a society where lots of things are just totally simplified, and I think a little too much. And I think that's just where a lot of this is, and people aren't really assessing themselves. And that's why we do this with movies, right? Because if you can do this with movies, then you probably could do it in your own life. And I think that was the value of analyzing text in school, that people say they never use any of the things. Well, you probably should.
And then you come on here in comments without the practice of that, because I can tell the people who have practiced analyzing things and then the people who have had less practice, right?
Yeah. It's like you haven't analyzed things, but you have positions on things that you haven't thoroughly analyzed
and haven't thought through. So I always find that to be a little bit of an interesting thing. But in the end, I really think the idea of communication, because this is almost communication in relationships is very important, but it's what should you be communicating? And I think that you shouldn't. This is my personal view. I know a lot of people will, especially dating coaches and all that, would have a different thing. But I think just the way Nina said, I'm not trying to play you. Like, I think people have to, I think you have to just come to the table with a certain amount of honesty. Because if you come in with game and I'm trying to game you, like, I don't want to be with somebody I got to be trying to game and this game. And yes, it may leave you open for people who might have different intentions. And, you got to just hope and trust that you're going to see the red flags of that happening to you. But like, how could you be happy when you're just constantly gaming somebody, constantly,
because you're probably into games. So
maybe sure I don't know. So that to each his own, but I would say that's a huge
Think about
problem.
What a troll is, right? We get trolls in the comments, right?
Sure.
They get off on trying to get you to feel a certain way.
Yeah, well, which is why they just get blocked.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, so and then you could be like, oh, it's because they're not happy. Yeah, but in this part, and in these instances, they're happy. You know what I'm saying? It may not be everlasting happiness
so maybe
or fulfillment.
maybe the Jones is for a certain thing, right? Your Jones is you get off on,
on antagonizing people online and seeing their reaction.
Yeah.
So as Black people, when you see people saying certain things on the internet, just don't play into it because they want you to react the way that they know you're going to react to the stuff they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Hint, hint.
So that's that.
Yeah.
But I think and we didn't talk about this, but was the film entertaining to you?
Entertaining? No. I didn't like this movie. I didn't.
It didn't. Okay, so this movie and Brown Sugar are two movies that just did not resonate with me.
Brown Sugar either. So
I don't like either one of those
my
movies.
thing was, you were talking about how it sparked those types of movies.
Mm-hmm.
My point was saying that it probably sparked just us being able to make romance films.
Right. Not struggle romance films, but actual, yeah.
Yeah, because the ones before that, that was the straight hood era. And then, they're like, let's bring some culture to
Well,
this.
we all deserve representation and everybody doesn't come from the same place. There isn't just one Black background. And
Waiting to Exhale was before this too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that we can have all manner of depictions of Black life on screen, and we deserve that. We were talking about the folks who had an issue with Tyler Perry's most recent film that we, here in 2025, Straw, and the fact they were like, I'm not watching that. I can't be bothered away. And I get that you may want to take a stand, but I think I told somebody, I'm like, my personal thing is if it's Black, written by a Black person, acted by mostly Black people, I'm willing to give it a chance.
And then, so the thing is too, we talk about what people say that those movies should not exist. And then there's arguments from people who agree, who try to change the argument, straw man, right? They try to say, well, people are saying that they don't think this movie should exist because of this plot. No, they're saying, they actually say it, right? That they'll stop making movies about the single mothers.
Yeah.
That is the statement.
Yeah. Which is like wild, But I'll also say, I just think everybody, why can't we all have an opportunity for whatever it is to be depicted on film? If we look at the predominant society, we see that they got good movies, bad movies, A, B, C, D, E, F, G movies.
Yeah. And just imagine if the people with money decided, oh, I don't want to see no more movies about that Black shit, like they're actually saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or that gay shit or whatever, insert here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they just stopped making the stuff. And that's why we didn't really have so-called good movies in the 80s, right?
So I do have a question for those of you, because I know this is like a beloved film and, it's not one of my favorites. And I want to know like the reasons in the comments. Please tell me like, why do you love it? And you know what? One thing, because somebody will inevitably be like, y'all forgot where. So inevitably, or, I'll misspeak like I do frequently. If you talked as much as me on on recordings, you probably make some mistakes too. But anyway, because I'm sure we have thousands of hours at this point. Between the podcast that we used to have back in the day and now, it's got to be thousands.
Yeah, because we did 500 episodes that were 30 minutes to an hour in the podcast alone.
Yeah. So I say that to say that there was a point where Darius is talking about, who was it who said that the art, that you remember it was a quote about art and the artist, the pursuit of to make the definitive works or something like that can't be challenged or something. The pursuit of art. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's okay. So when she was basically calling him a Renaissance man, I believe is what you're talking about. And then he was like, basically, the artist's role is to make the definitive work, right? And the definitive work probably can't just be the one thing, right? So if I just play an instrument and I'm expressing through the sound of this instrument, then I may also add a voice, right? And then when I add that voice, I may also add pictures or moving pictures. You know what I'm saying? And all of these things. And then I may add dancing and all these other things to make the definitive work of whatever my expression or my feeling is.
Yeah.
I think is what the quote was really trying to,
or his quoting that, but he's saying it like, I felt like it was from a place of ego. Like, I want to be the one that writes the definitive thing on this. And maybe this was his arc, part of it,
That's what
right?
I'm saying about the ego of artists, right? And you looking down on people who do lesser work. And I don't know if you're a good artist.
As determined by you.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a good artist if you don't do that too, right? Because my expression has to be the best. Like, so I used to rap, right? And I make my favorite songs because I make and say exactly what I want to hear and say, right? No other artist has ever wrote the perfect perspective for me. That is why people create art, and that's why you should create art and not just sit around and consume it.
Okay, so back to the question about, do I have to write something if I go to the, as you said, speakeasy? You know, do I have to participate, or can I be do I have to actually perform? Do I have to contribute to
everybody who was there? They would get up. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody there were probably poets.
Yeah,
right?
Such a hard
when
thing,
you go to open mic night, all those people, they're performing for their peers too. And then if you can stand out amongst your peers, then you know you good too.
I wrote poetry before during that period.
That means you done a lot of it.
I had about 6 months where I intensely chose to do poetry as opposed to prose, which is what I would normally be writing. And yeah, I'm not a succinct person, as you guys can probably tell. Like, I'm very verbose. And
my biggest achievement, it ain't my biggest. Back in first grade, I won a parish-wide contest. Well, did I win it? I think I got second place on short story. It has to be short because you're in first grade. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? So then, every time something like that happened, and you're rewarded or revered, right? When you're a child, that's what you want to do. So I'm like, I want to be an author.
I wanted to be a writer. That is something. And you know what? Actually, I became a writer.
Exactly.
I became a writer, actually. In my career, I became a writer. I wasn't just writing books. By the way, would you guys want a book from us?
I actually said it in a song. I said I wanted to be an author, so I turned into a rapper.
Interesting way to put that. Yeah. So, but you know, I love the idea of expression and art, and I don't think we all have to adhere to just whatever is somebody's definition of art and all that is. But what I will say is I'm becoming very exhausted with theft. And I know it's a slippery slope with AI these days, but like, we're at the point, okay, like, let's even take AI off the table. I mean regular theft. Like an idea has to just be memed to death, and I'm tired of it. Like, I'm exhausted when I look. It is literal brain rot. I don't need to see 50 ways to say the same thing. Recently we started back working out, and you're watching videos about techniques and things like that. And then to keep you engaged, they'll have different things like, somebody does some skit type stuff, right? And then you see everybody do the same stupid skit. And I'm just like, I can't stand it anymore. But you know what? Maybe some people have an appetite for it. I personally don't. It's just not my thing. And I find it to be a nuisance. And I think it takes away from any creativity that people would have. That's the problem that I have with theft, and we won't even get into like monetization of the theft. But
so the thing is too, you have to also become better at the craft. If that's not the pursuit too, then I don't really like to consider those types artists in a sense, because that is where it comes. You can't just be like, oh, I just made something trying to make some money and I'm better than Tupac. You know what I'm saying? Like, you haven't even worked on it. You don't care about it being good or whatever, or the technical aspects of what you're doing. But I just think everyone should pursue art and try to get better and have respect for other people's work where you can recognize this person is good.
Yeah.
Right. And even though I say the thing of, oh, your ego, and I think that I made the best whatever song, or I may be the best at doing whatever, that's not necessarily true, because there's other artists I look at and I'm like, that person is amazing. You know what I'm saying? That person's amazing. I can't do what that person does. That's how good they are. So.
Well, I think the way I took what you said was also kind of an expression of the passion. The passion of the idea that I'm best equipped to express my perspective.
Yeah, and sometimes you're not. Like,
I mean, like that's why Keke Palmer got a writer.
When I play piano or whatever, right, I just can't express what some people can express.
But with more practice. But let me tell you, he's come a long way. Like, you can express a lot more today than you could 5 years ago.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's just it. But thank you all so much for joining us. I just want to also say thanks again to Anton Colvin for having us to look at this movie again, because I like just revisiting and just how did I feel about it now versus then and all of that. So we appreciate it, and we appreciate your support of the channel. And also Kelvin Pollard, almost like a day one supporter of the channel, and just regularly holds it down for us, and we just appreciate you and all the other people who do the same as well, because through the valleys and the mountaintops that we experience with YouTube channels here, and having this as not just a hobby for us but part of our business, we rely on you all to help us make it worthwhile as an experience, but also we gotta have money to just live and eat. So we appreciate you all more than you know.
If you made it this far, type "just kicking it" in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now, and visit axiom.app, where you will find all of our recent videos in one place, and there are links back to YouTube so that you can watch them here.